In this video we discuss how to establish clusters. A cluster identifies a list of unit IDs that serves some purpose for the investigator. For example, if unit IDs correspond to genes, a cluster might be the list of genes involved in immune response. Clusters are set up by the investigator in an Excel worksheet. The format is shown below, and in worksheet example data. In Ranger, clusters are used to limit the number of units processed by an action. We click on Select Cluster Source. As with source files, select the cluster workbook and the worksheet within the workbook. Ranger uses the name of the selected worksheet to identify a common cluster set associated with each list. That information is recorded in worksheet cluster IDs. Click OK. In worksheet WS, we see that 3 worksheets were added. Worksheet Cluster Discard displays the unit IDs from each list that were not found in a source file. Worksheet Cluster Data displays the lists of unit IDs that were found in at least one source file. Worksheet ClusterEDS contains information about the cluster lists that Ranger uses in its processing. In Worksheet Cluster Discard, shown below left, we see the units that were discarded from the cluster lists. Below right, in Worksheet Cluster Data, we see the units that were retained in the cluster lists. The investigator may, for a specific purpose, want to establish a subset of the full set of cluster lists. For some Ranger actions, use of a cluster subset can reduce processing time and output volume. We click on Define Cluster Subset. Select the name of the cluster set, the original worksheet containing the lists of units. Select up to 5 lists to be included in the subset. Provide a short subset ID that will be included in the name of the subset. In this example, we indicated that the red and blue lists should be included, but not the green list. The short name is RB. In Worksheet ClusterEDS, the names of individual cluster lists appear in column A. The names of the associated cluster sets appear in column C. We see that lists red and blue are associated with the Rangerclass set, the original, and also with the Rangerclass subset. The green list is associated only with the original Rangerclass set. The Find Common Units action allows the investigator to identify which source units are common to multiple unit clusters. Select the data source. In this example, the control source was selected. Select the cluster set. In this example, the original cluster set was selected. Indicate the minimum number of unit matches that must be found. Click OK. We see that worksheet cluster unit mismatch was added. In the cluster unit match worksheet, we see that 13 units appeared in at least 2 cluster lists. 4 units appeared in all 3 lists. 9 units appeared in 2 of the 3 lists. To the right, we see that 8 units from source EXP appeared in fewer than 2 cluster lists. A column has also been added to the cluster data worksheet. The 13 units that appear in at least 2 of the 3 original cluster lists now form a new cluster list. Special feature. The cluster feature, in combination with Find Common Units, can be used to examine a set of unit lists to determine which units are common to all, or some, of the lists. This activity is independent of source data and of all other Ranger activities. Note that on the Select Cluster Source entry screen, you have the option of checking an independent cluster box. You would prepare a worksheet containing your sets of lists, as shown below left. The worksheet must follow the cluster format. Check the independent cluster box and click OK. Ranger stores the data in worksheets similar to those used for cluster data, ClusterEDS and cluster data IND. In this example, we have selected the same cluster worksheet used in previous examples. On the Find Common Units entry screen, select the Independent Cluster option. Select the cluster set. Ranger sets cluster unit match minimum to the number of columns in the worksheet. Here we have changed the value from 3 to 2, meaning that we want to see which units are found in at least 2 of the 3 lists. As before, in the cluster unit match worksheet, we see the units that appeared in at least 2 cluster lists. Instead of adding a new list to the cluster data worksheet, Ranger generates a single worksheet containing the list of units appearing in the specified number of cluster lists. You can use this list for other purposes external to Ranger. You could also set this list up as a cluster list to serve as input to another Ranger session. This marks the end of the discussion of how to establish clusters. In separate videos, further use of clusters will be explained.